Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this week's Red Short webinar. My name is Bill Schenkelberg, and today I'll be talking with Tim Bemitez, who's the resident agent in charge with the United States Secret Service up here in New Hampshire. In addition to protecting the president, vice president, and all the other dignitaries, Tim is a cybersecurity expert. Today, he's going to share with us his top cyber issues he's seeing in his vital work that he does on a daily basis. As we say every week, you can find all our information on our Red Shorts on similar topics at redskyalliance.org. If you've missed any of the previous Red Shorts, you can find them there as well. Good morning, Tim. And if you could give us a little background on the Secret Service and specifically on your cybersecurity mission, we can get going.
Great. Thank you, Bill. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me on Red Shorts. I've been in the Secret Service for approximately 24 years, worked in New York City, D.C., and spent the last 6 years here in New Hampshire. As you mentioned, we do our protection mission. Presidents, vice presidents, former presidents, and former and foreign heads of state. But actually, we were formed in 1865 to combat counterfeiting. And today we continue this dual mission, protecting our nation's leaders and protecting our nation's financial infrastructure. So through the years, our investigative mission has kind of evolved, and we began with counterfeiting. We moved to check fraud, and then to credit card fraud schemes. More recently, we see ACH and wire payment fraud. And now the latest topic, which we're focusing on, is cryptocurrency fraud schemes and how cryptocurrency is related to the payment system, and how do we protect the citizens of New Hampshire and our country.
Well, great. I know, having worked in my past life with the Secret Service, I know you guys have, guys and gals, have a very diverse mission, not only the protection, but doing all the fraud schemes and everything like that. So the first topic that we, Tim and I, had previously discussed, it was, in the social engineering realm. And based on, at least our research on our side, it seems to be getting worse with social engineering techniques, taking advantage of people, their identities, and on the IT side, their domains and emails and passwords. So I'm going to pass it over to Tim, if he can talk about some of the social engineering issues that they're seeing, to include like open source type information.
Yeah, great, Bill. When we prepared and spoke about talking with you today, there are definitely many technical ways to protect ourselves. But, through our cases in the last 6 years, especially here in New Hampshire and throughout the country, we see a tremendous amount of fraudulent activity being the result of social engineering. Whether it's phishing, smishing, a phone call, open source information gathering like LinkedIn, social media posts, city, county, and state websites that have information, newspapers, your private company websites that has information on it. There's thousands of examples of how schemes were committed and perpetrated against businesses and individuals. I will tell you, in even the more sophisticated cases we've seen, the commonality has always been a human error or the exploitation of a human. One example, which gratefully the town administrators have often talked to us about in public, is the Peterborough, New Hampshire business email compromise case. This case began with a suspected email compromise about 8 months earlier, but they utilized both email forwarding rules within their email client, as well as they purchased domains with very similar names to also utilize when emailing back and forth. But they were eventually successful in $2.3 million of fraudulent payments being occurring. The most of the payments went to mules or other accounts that was set up with stolen PII. And the interesting aspect of this, how it goes from the human element all the way to extremely technical element, is that these suspects utilize compromised residential routers in New Jersey, to obtain an IP address and log in and create bank accounts as they were in the United States. Because as we know, IPs are blocked or scrutinized heavily from overseas areas when you're logging into a bank. 2 points I want to make about this case is, although this is sophisticated transnational group, and we've linked, and this is an ongoing case that is upwards of $15 million in numerous other states, the same vectors. They went after towns and school systems. It's ongoing. So it does take a lot of time to work these cases. We're working with other agencies as well on this. But I think the most important point on my social engineering is every person, every employee, we must begin to take personal responsibility for their actions online. In this case, an employee received a spoofed email. He then received and completed a request to change a bank account. There was no second step or authorization by a second person when they changed that bank account payment, and they utilized a phone number that was listed on the fake email that they received, which came back to a Text Now phone number, which, if you don't know, is up in Canada. And They did this not just with one vendor, but it was actually done with two separate vendors, and it wasn't realized until a past invoice was sent from one of the vendors for payment. So it's important to understand that a lot of these are, we should have a greater sense of cyber hygiene as individuals. And also, people need to understand that the majority of this money is going to our overseas adversaries, whether they're nation state, transnational, sophisticated actors, or just copycats. This money is going overseas for the most part, and it's very difficult to get that money returned, and it's very difficult and time-consuming to extradite these individuals when we do find them.
So that brings back a memory of mine. About 5 years ago, I was at a cyber discussion at a local community college, and there was an engineer from Carbon Black, I'll say one of our competitors there, who was giving a very technical talk, which I personally didn't even grasp what he was talking about. But at the end of it, he made a comment that stuck in my head, and that was, if we could only eliminate the people, everything would be perfect. But you can't, take out the human element of any of this stuff. And I think that's where the bad guys are really kind of concentrating with the social engineering part of this.
No, I agree. I agree wholeheartedly that you're never going to take out the human element. And, like our protection model, we're all about mitigating risk. So we have to mitigate risk. And how do we do that? That's the important part.
Right. I agree. So the next topic that Tim and I had discussed was the cryptocurrency and the fraud associated with it. So Tim, if you could kind of give a little background on the crypto, and I'll prompt that by saying, I was at a meeting close to 10 years ago now at the Boston Federal Reserve, and in their lobby they had a big display on all the different monetary uses, starting from people using beads for money, all the way up to our current banking type systems. And at the end of it, it showed crypto currency, or the e-commerce, And that was 10 years ago, which I thought was like interesting at that time. And I still think it's interesting. But I know with the Bankman case, and some of the various cryptocurrencies are I think there's some negative press that's out there. But if you can kind of give a little explanation on crypto and the fraud associated with it, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, thanks, Bill. We are seeing a tremendous uptick in cryptocurrency fraud, whether it's whether it's Bitcoin or one of the other coins that are being used. As we know, the cryptocurrency arena is going through discussions on regulation, and that's a somewhat of a hot topic. But I think it's important from a criminal perspective to understand that cryptocurrency is just a digital dollar per se, whether it's a blockchain like Bitcoin or another blockchain like Ethereum. Or just a CBDC, a central bank digital currency. These are all ledgers, kind of, I guess you can look at it like an Excel spreadsheet that tracks transactions forever. And the good part from a criminal perspective is forever. Cryptocurrencies can be anonymous, but they're not entirely anonymous. When a transaction occurs on that ledger is forever. So, for instance, a case that we have worked, we were able to see money go into a crypto exchange, and then the purchase of cryptocurrency in that exchange, and then a transfer of that cryptocurrency to another exchange that was overseas. And then we can identify who owned or who was holding that cryptocurrency in that overseas exchange, and subsequently seize those funds back for our victim. So, it is not foolproof in terms of anonymity. But along those lines, there are cryptocurrencies and or cryptocurrency tumblers or mixers that make it extremely difficult for law enforcement to track the funds. So it is a great technology, and it should be explored, but it also does have a larger vector for criminal activity until folks in the federal government and local law enforcement, catch up to them. But for an example, I believe Chain Analysis put out a crypto crime report just for perspective of a narrative that is only used for criminal activity. They estimated $20.6 billion was transacted in criminal activity. The Secret Service, a report that check fraud alone was $15 billion in 2022. So is it used for criminal activity? Yes, but in the anti-money laundering realm, cash is king. Cash is very hard to trace, especially unless it goes through a bank account. But there's a lot of ways to launder money. I wouldn't say cryptocurrency or Bitcoin is a foolproof way. A couple of the schemes, cryptocurrency is a large topic and there's a lot of facets to it. So it's hard to hit in a couple minutes. But some of the cases that we see, a scheme called pig butchering, and it's basically an investment scam. They get you to they spoof an exchange. They have someone contact you, tell you they're an investment advisor. You give them money. They set up an exchange that shows you're making a lot of profits, and then when you try to take your money out, you never get it. They tell you you have to pay a fee. An endless number of lies of why you can't get your money, but they keep getting you to put money in. So you have to be careful to go to a reputable exchange if you're going to be in cryptocurrency. The other problem that we see is cryptocurrency ATMs are often, well, I'm going to say predominantly because the fees for a cryptocurrency ATM are extremely high. So I'm not sure why you would go to a cryptocurrency ATM rather than an exchange, but there may be reasons. But we do see a lot of scams being directed towards a cryptocurrency ATM. So that's an avenue we're investigating more and more, just so we can weed out the crime. And if there is a legitimate purpose, we are in the business of building confidence in the nation's financial infrastructure, like we did back in days when we investigated counterfeit currency. And then, along the same lines as bank fraud is, crypto theft. Often occurs through compromised login credentials. So, like you would lose your credentials to your bank account through a phishing campaign, you lose your credentials through a phishing campaign or a smishing campaign, and you lose your credentials for your cryptocurrency exchange.
So I have a question. You mentioned paper currency or cash is king. In your opinion, do you think cash will ever be eliminated in the future? Maybe not in our lifetime, but do you think that's where we're headed?
I think it'll never be eliminated in the United States, just because I think there is a big push that people like to use. Certain people like to use cash,
Right,
but after it seems like after 2020 and 2021 with the COVID years, a lot more merchants have gone to paperless,
right,
no currency. So it's kind of almost helped that trend, whether it's a payment system on your phone or a credit card. I do see a lot more of that. Yeah.
right. And one thing you brought up, which I think was, at least for me, kind of refreshing, is we used to say there's always a paper trail to a lot of this fraud stuff, and you're saying that even with the crypto, there is a trail out there. So that's good to know. Because when I first, like 10 years ago, heard about the crypto, it was like, wow, how you gonna regulate that? How are you going to investigate that? And it just seemed overwhelming to me at the time. But you're saying that there is a quote unquote paper trail out there to some extent. So that's good to know.
Yeah, it is. I'm going to speak for the Bitcoin blockchain. The Bitcoin blockchain, there is a ledger. It is public, so every transaction it has the ability to be looked at. Now it's a bunch of characters, right? 16-digit characters where the wallet address, but it is open and it is public information. Um, the algorithm. That's what makes a transaction complete. Is the computer energy that is used to certify that transaction as legitimate. So it is there. The point I wanted to make is you can have Bitcoin and hold it in a cold storage wallet for 10 years. The fact is, we're considering it currency or a store of value, and you still need to go to somewhere to transfer that back into fiat currency. So
Right.
somebody still needs to go somewhere to exchange that Bitcoin back to money at some degree if they're going to utilize it, just because, we're not buying many things with Bitcoin at this point.
Right. Interesting. Very interesting. So there's, when we're talking about bank and financial fraud, we already kind of bled into this topic, with our last topic. But one of the things that you had mentioned prior is about the attorneys and the attorney firms, which I thought was like kind of fascinating. So if you want to expand upon the bank and financial fraud, that would be helpful.
Yeah, along the lines of business email compromise. I don't think I mentioned a business email compromise yet, but business email compromise is the single most damaging cyber-enabled financial fraud scheme that exists. So it is in some form convincing a legitimate person to pay a bill through an ACH or wire, but they're purporting to be somebody else. And the schemes in this one is endless too. But it's good to know. I mean, in New Hampshire alone, we had two towns. And this goes back to why open source information, and you as a business understanding what open source information is on the web, or what open source information is being discussed on the dark web, is extremely important, because as a cybersecurity professional, you may be getting pings on your system left and right, and you don't know why. You're just stopping them all day long. So it's good to get intelligence. And I just know for one instance in New Hampshire, two towns were doing a construction project, building a school and a park, and the construction company was in New Hampshire. Um, this was all public information. New Hampshire is great for public information. The contracts for these projects were on the town's website. The contracts were being advertised on the construction company's website because that was their business. It was like advertising. Well, fraudsters from overseas realized this. They started to attack construction companies, and it wasn't just New Hampshire. As we looked into this, there were construction companies out of Colorado and I believe Utah and California that also fell for the same, well, towns that fell for the same thing. But basically, they just used a free web free web client, Gmail, Yahoo, Hotmail, and created a new email address with the construction company's name. They they actually went on LinkedIn and or just emailed that company, got the legitimate. It was the same exact email signature from the chief financial officer of that construction company, and they sent bills to the two towns. Well, the two towns, they usually do this on a Friday or before a holiday. The two towns got the change of banking information. In that conversation, they discussed when the next payment was there. So they didn't know when the next payment was coming, but they got that out of the town financial officer. And then they changed the bank information. And then they went ahead and one town sent $1.3 million. The other town sent $680,000. Luckily, we found the mule in Texas who had something like 23 businesses opened up in and registered with the state of Texas, and he was coached by overseas actors how to do this. So he set up these accounts, and we were able to get that money back. But it just goes to show you, we're back to the human element here in the banking. A final point on the banking and financial fraud is, as we deal with private companies, another great attack vector, along with social engineering, is also your third party vendors, and what's their exposure. If you're getting an email from a third party and their email system, they're a small company, small manufacturing company, and their email system is totally breached, and they're rerouting the emails to another folder, and the payment processor at the small manufacturing company doesn't realize it, is not receiving any emails, and the bad actors are in their system. That payment could be sent to you. You could be doing nothing wrong. Maybe you didn't do good due diligence when you changed the AC and routing banking information. But these cases are extremely difficult to litigate civilly. It's extremely difficult to get the insurance companies and lawyers involved to come to a resolution with the bank. The pure volume of these cases on a daily basis. I'm going to go back to my days in New York. You have to have a guy. Luckily, with the Secret Service, we've been able to develop these relationships, and you talk to a bank and you get them to respond to you, because as you can imagine, a bank is getting hundreds, maybe a larger bank, thousands of incidents. There's a lot of volume going in and out to try to reverse these wires that are occurring.
Wow, and I think that shows the sophistication of these hackers that are out there and how they're connected globally with that sophistication. Interesting. So I put an example up there of a Secret Service bulletin that Tim shares with whoever is the recipient, and this one specifically was on a recent one was on real estate scams. If you can maybe tell our audience about those bulletins and specifically the real estate scam.
So we do have, and in New Hampshire, we are developing a larger reach, working with Bill, and we have a cyber fraud task force. So we, like back in the '90s, we're developing private sector partnerships, and we try to get the information. We need the private sector to provide us with this intel as well, right? To do reporting. So we have a global investigation operations center, which was stood up by a former Manchester special agent, Matt O'Neill. I'll give him some great credit, kudos. He's an excellent investigator, and he has worked some global. Transnational cases out of New Hampshire. And to give him further credit, he worked hacks with a credit agency where a Vietnamese national was selling PII, and that person served 10 years out of the District of New Hampshire.
Wow.
But what Matt found out was these cases are global, and you need to build not only local law enforcement and private sector partnerships, but global partnerships to get these cases prosecuted and get justice for victims. So, this real estate scam one is based on properties that are sitting dormant, and basically they're putting properties that are dormant. They're finding out the tax information for those in New Hampshire. All property information is public in New Hampshire, so you can get information on anybody's home or where they live in New Hampshire. So they find out where somebody lives. Usually it's somebody older or somebody recently deceased. There is no mortgage on that property, so it's paid off, and then they put it up for sale, and they quickly convince a title company and a real estate agent to make the transaction quickly, and they get the transfer of funds from the person that thinks they're buying it. The transfer goes through, but actually the whole time the suspect has claimed they owned it and acted as the owner, but they were never the owner. More recently, speaking to the legal and law firm, I saw some stuff which was interesting, that law firms may be targeted for ransomware, and some of the reasons why did make sense to me. They usually have a high volume of documents with extreme importance, legal documents, and as well confidential information. So these documents are important, whether with a financial angle, like getting paid for a retainer, or a legal case or a litigation case. Most clients don't want this stuff leaked to the public. They want to settle, but there's a high volume of document sharing, and then basically the ransomware act is used more of the extortion perspective, where they're looking to extort clients and make them pay. And as we know, with every company, not just law firms, but reputation is key. So everybody wants to make sure that although there are victims out there, Secret Service will refer everybody back to the victim. We don't make comments on companies, but reputation is key. So this is definitely a good angle. We'll have to see how it plays out.
Right. Well, before we switch to that, you're talking about open source information. We were talking about it a couple slides prior. And I know with the property records, some states are clamping down on that, because some research I was conducting just recently, depending on the state and where the property is, you can't get that information. So I know governments and even private companies and that are becoming more aware of the quote unquote open source information, and clamping down on the security, which I think is a good thing, personally.
No, I'd have to agree, and it brings me to another case that we had. I'll do it briefly, but where high profile people in Boston were targeted. And basically, it was done by somebody that was in jail and coordinated by them
Wow.
to other actors. But the interesting part about it, which I didn't know, but there's a lot of public records that can be obtained in Boston, like I think marriage certificate and birth certificate, stuff along those lines, and that's what they utilized to perpetrate the scheme.
Right, and I think a segue into our next slide, it would be I know I do it myself is you know Google your own name just to see what's out there, see what's floating around out there, and if you have access to someone that could check into the dark web, just see if you're out there and if people are selling your information. And I know it would be an eye opener for some people. So with that in our last slide here, this discussion was really interesting. So if you could give maybe some words of wisdom on some mitigation efforts that people can take, I'd appreciate that.
Great. Yes, I want to first start by thanking you for having me and talking about this on behalf of the Secret Service. We appreciate speaking with the private sector, and we look to build more partnerships. We definitely can't do it without others. With that being said, we have a cyber fraud task force. They're all run differently. Me and Bill have a great relationship. I encourage you to go out and reach out to your local Secret Service office. But above and beyond that, we have a center, National Computer Forensic Institute. This stuff is all on our public-facing website at secretservice.gov. But we train local law enforcement officers to do cyber investigations and digital forensics. And we have some great people throughout the country, but specifically in New Hampshire. So, and the problem with the government and local is that so many of you folks on the private sector steal them before they actually make it to the retirement age. But they're out there, and it's a great resource out there. But I think a couple of the things that I thought were is a must, and we didn't get technical here today, but but some of the I guess the more technical things is we see often systems that are unpatched, and that was the vulnerability. So patch the system as soon as possible. It's basic, but as we all know, sometimes it's not the priority. And second is two-factor on all emails. Authentication, because that is huge. It's just another layer. I mean, you want to slow the bad guy down so he doesn't go for you and he goes for somebody else. That's mitigation. You just want to slow him down. So any small step you can take is very good. And then lastly, and most importantly in today's day and age, because the pure volume of attacks has just increased exponentially with global with the situation with global politics. It's not as peaceful as it once was. You have to use a service to protect your company. You have to know. You have to find some information, and you're not a roadblock. So you need to be utilizing a service that has searching open source information, is providing you with information that's out there on your company, and more importantly, you need to be looking in the dark. You need a company that is looking in the dark web, scraping if credit cards are being taken from your company. They're selling this stuff to other people, so it's out there. You need to find somebody that can find this information. So if your company is on the dark web, or is about to be attacked, or is a vector, like if you're a law firm and that is a trend, your spidey sense needs to go up, and you can get that from companies that are out there.
Right. So if you fall victim to a hack or DDoS or anything bad, ransomware, what would be the best avenue to call in that complaint and ask for help?
I do want to say, if you are a victim, I can guarantee you your name will be on the dark web, because they're trying to sell that. So you definitely want to get ahead of that. But also, you could reach out to what we always say is, you reach out to the law enforcement entity that you developed a relationship with. So that's
Right.
the most important, is develop a relationship. You go on to the secretservice.gov before the incident occurs. You call up your local office and you find somebody like me and say, hey, I heard somebody speak. I want to just say hello and get a part of the cyber fraud task force. You want to know somebody beforehand. If you're more comfortable and FBI is more active in your district, maybe you reach out to them. Another good avenue, many people complain that that they don't get a response, is ic3.gov
Right.
to report an incident. But I will say it's not that people don't want to respond. There's just an overwhelming number of complaints, and that's why it's important to train our local law enforcement and to have these conversations with the private sector.
Right. And I'd like to say, I came out of the law enforcement world too, that even at your small law enforcement level, today, most agencies know who to contact when there is a cyber incident, be it whoever that may be, either on the state level or the federal level. Bottom line is call someone, report it so that you can get some help. But if you take some of the mitigation efforts that Tim just talked about, it will hopefully you won't become a victim therein. So good. Thanks, Tim. Tim mentioned the services. Red Sky Alliance does provide those type services specifically through our Red X-ray product. So here up on the screen are contact information of how you can get in touch with us, because we are every day in, I call it the underground, but we are in the dark web, and we, with our tools, we can scrape whatever those keywords and hopefully find information to get back to whoever is asking for our help, to blacklist that information to help protect their network. So so give us a call if you need. So Tim, thanks for taking the time this morning to help our members and our guests to gain insight into the current fraud schemes, and most important, where to get help. And I think the Secret Service is on the cutting edge of that. And next, thanks to everyone that's here on the call here today. I hope today's material was of interest. If you need to get in touch with us, our information is up on this screen. If you need to get in touch with Tim, you can do that through the Secret Service, website. It'll get funneled to him, or call your local law enforcement agency or your state agency. They can also help you. With that, I will say have a nice day. Thanks again to Tim, and we'll see you all next week on the 22nd of March. Thank you.